What connection exists between syphilis and the interpretation of Nietzsche's works in an aphoristic or almost prophetic manner? In actuality, Nietzsche was not a prophet. While it is true that he penned aphorisms, he did so due to his visual impairments. After approximately 20 minutes, he would be unable to continue writing due to a progressive paralysis resulting from syphilis. The disease was contracted when his companions took him to a brothel during his school days, and he felt so disgusted by that experience that he threw himself onto the piano in the establishment's hall, exclaiming, "This is the most human thing in this place." As a consequence, he contracted syphilis, a condition for which there was no cure at the time, as a small amount of antibiotics would have sufficed. Sadly, they were not accessible, causing the disease to progress to his brain. When the infection reaches the brain, it initiates paranoid and terrifying episodes. Nietzsche was born in 1844. His father was a Protestant pastor, so he was exposed to that whole world of reference to God from a young age. Little Nietzsche was already a genius because at the age of 4, on the occasion of his father's death, authored a 2-verse distich declaring, "A good man was laid to rest, but to me, he was a superman." At 4, the idea of the Superman began developing within him, a notion later exploited by the Nazis for their twisted ideologies. We shall soon explore why and by whom this overman concept was influenced. As we will see shortly, this overman transcends conventional Western thinking, surpassing its norms, its established logic, its scientific advancements, and its religious constructs. Departing from truths, deities, sciences, and Western philosophies is the essence of this overman. In continuation of his life narrative, Nietzsche found himself enamored with Salomè, albeit without success. Interestingly, Salomè initially crossed paths with Nietzsche, followed by Rilke, whom she genuinely fell for, and eventually Freud. Back then, it seemed quite effortless for a woman to encounter these illustrious figures. Consider Schopenhauer as Nietzsche's mentor, whom he later disavowed. Nietzsche exhibited an erratic writing style, churning out nearly a book annually, showcasing an innate flair for artistic expression and unparalleled analytical prowess. Friedrich Ritschl, a preeminent philologist in Europe based in Basel, recognized Nietzsche's burgeoning talent. Impressed by a 20-page essay sent by Nietzsche, Ritschl extended an offer for Nietzsche to teach philology at Basel. Without completing his academic pursuits, Nietzsche assumed a professorial role 3 years into his studies. The narrative takes a grim turn as Nietzsche's sister, upon his mental breakdown in 1888, callously exhibited him for public viewing on a bench in their home for a fee. The scene of one of history's greatest thinkers huddled, serving as entertainment for his heartless sister, evokes a deep sense of unease. Following his passing, she meticulously gathered and amalgamated his unpublished writings into a unified manuscript titled The Will to Power, subtly altering the content to align with an emerging Nazi ethos, which was yet to take tangible form, but loomed in the cultural domain of early 20th century Germany. For example, where it said who the overman is, she changed it to "We are the overman." It is also because of this that Nietzsche became the icon of Nazism, of fascism in the 1970s. Entering deeply into the two works, Nietzsche destroys Western philosophy, beginning with the creator and greatest figure, Plato. He accomplishes this, as mentioned, with a hammer. Philosophy should be executed with a hammer. Initially tackling Platonism and logic, followed by Christianity, viewed by Nietzsche as a simplified Platonism rather than a religion. Nietzsche, as stated earlier, disassembles Western philosophy through a strict methodical approach and with the hammer, which involves this. Rather than following Plato's approach of questioning, what are things? What is reason? What is truth? What is good? What is just? Nietzsche argues against this, suggesting not to ponder on what a thing is, as doing so would already present an advantage to the definer. Instead, one should inquire, how did this thing come about? Why was there a necessity for the emergence of a God? What drove the inception of reason? When discussing the origin of reason, his response is, by coincidence. We are urged to explore this randomness and ascertain the circumstances that led to this thing's genesis, rendering futile the debate on the existence or non-existence of God because the concept of God arose, signifying a need for it, a requirement people had for this concept, and why did they require it? Because only what is constant, what is unchanging, what is static, what provides assurance, forms the foundation for leading a life. If an idea functions in terms of stability, it is deemed truthful, but this idea is not inherently true. It is perceived as true merely because it is effective. Truth is solely defined by the efficiency of its operation. So where does reason come from? Nietzsche argues that this idea of reason came into being because there was a danger. If reason was not invented, we would have fallen into disaster, perhaps into the extinction of a people. This is the necessity that induces the invention of reason. And where does this necessity come from? It comes from the tragic condition in which the Greeks found themselves. Why the Greeks and not other peoples? Because, Nietzsche rightly says, the Greeks are the only people who had the courage to face pain. It seems like a trivial matter, but the Christians did not have this courage. Why? Because they faced pain by thinking of healing or salvation in view of something positive. No, the pain, the one for which there is no remedy, the one for which the Stoics say, endure, abstain, endure it, and refrain from putting it on display. They had the courage to face pain. And what is this pain? Pain is death. Men die like animals, like plants, and they know they have to die. But they took this thing seriously. Why do we die? Because we are elements of nature, elements of the species, which can survive only if individuals are born, grow, generate, and die. There is the definition of the rational animal. But for Nietzsche, this is an incorrect definition for two reasons. We do not have the animal instinct, but we have the awareness of having the same destiny as the animal, that of having to die, while the animal does not know this. Consider the herd that grazes in front of you. It does not know what yesterday is, what today is. It leaps around, eats, rests, digests, leaps again, and so from dawn to dusk and from day to day, briefly connected with its pleasure and pain, attached, that is, to the moment's stake. Therefore, neither sad nor bored. Seeing this hurts man because compared to the animal, he boasts of his humanity and yet looks with envy at its happiness. Because this alone desires it, to live like the animal, neither bored nor among sufferings, and yet he desires it in vain because he does not want it like the animal. With these words, Nietzsche indicates a deep inner division within us, a concept the Greeks understood well. We serve as representatives of the human species, following nature's cycle of birth, growth, reproduction, and death. Yet, there exists within us an ego that craves to give meaning to its existence. We often ponder the purpose of our lives and the significance of our time. This pursuit of meaning stems from the self's desire for a purpose, a mission to fulfill. Thus, a conflict arises between our role as mere embodiments of the species, bound by mortality to ensure its continuity, and the human ego's aspiration for significance in the face of impending death, which threatens to render all pursuits futile. Nietzsche refers to this conflict as the incipit tragedia, marking the genesis of tragedy. Having dismantled Western philosophy rooted in Platonism and dismantled reason, Nietzsche now turns his attention to religion. Enter the famous phrase, "God is dead." To declare God dead implies that he was once alive and that the world operated according to his will. Indeed, the idea of God was not only alive, but also influential, shaping historical epochs like the Middle Ages, the Renaissance, and even the French Revolution, which by then no longer required the overthrow of religion, as Marxism did. The concept of God has been a potent force in organizing the Western world, Asserting that God is dead signifies that the world no longer centers around him. It signifies the death of a worldview that no longer functions, generates, or produces tangible effects. Without God, we would be incapable of understanding crucial aspects of history, such as the imagery of hell, purgatory, and paradise depicted in literature. Removing God from contemporary discourse, however, does not render the world incomprehensible. We would still grasp its essence. If we were to eliminate the term God from contemporary discourse, it would not hinder our understanding as it would if we removed words like money or technology. Yet, God's absence from the contemporary world signifies a shift away from a worldview where God was central, a worldview that once underpinned Western values. Having deconstructed Western philosophy, reason, and Christianity, Nietzsche proceeds to dismantle science. When science makes a discovery, it proclaims it as a scientific truth. Nietzsche likens science to children playing a game of hide-and-seek. It conceals something behind a bush, then searches for it, and finds it. But did science itself place that discovery behind the bush in the first place? This is how Nietzsche views science. Initially, I propose hypotheses. Then I subject nature to an experiment. If the experiment validates my hypotheses, I adopt these hypotheses as natural laws. But what do I apprehend? Nature itself, or my interpretation of nature based on my hypotheses? Science acknowledges that it does not assert absolute truths. Scientists understand this. It's we who often overlook it. Science refrains from declaring its findings as truths. Rather, it terms them as accuracies. Science communicates only precise information, not absolute truths. Accuracy denotes derived from the hypotheses I posited. Depending on my perspective, I yield corresponding results. Science does not pronounce truths. It articulates accuracies. At this juncture, Nietzsche has deconstructed reason, truth, religion, and science. These four elements constitute stabilizing structures that furnish us with order. They enable our existence, and from this standpoint, they fulfill a largely constructive role. Therefore, Nietzsche neither rejects nor disparages these structures he has dismantled, as an atheist might do toward God. Instead, Nietzsche asserts, do not assert that these are bastions of truth. They serve a functional purpose. Inventing reason, God, and science served practical ends. However, what reason purports, what God proclaims, or what is articulated in the name of God, and what science communicates, cannot be unequivocally termed as truth, and thus begins the era of nihilism. There is no purpose, no answers to the whys, as the values rooted in religion collapse due to the death of God. Consequently, morality, good and evil, become indistinguishable once they crumble. In this scenario, there is no purpose, no future. The absence of a future implies that if there's no future, the significance of the present also diminishes. Because without a future, even the present loses its meaning. Why should I be just? Why should I be good? If these actions don't impact the future, in that eschatological future that looms before me as the end of the world and the settling of all scores, there is no purpose. Thus, there is no answer to the why. Why am I in the world, and what am I doing here, if my existence is confined between a random birth, because that's what our birth represents, one in millions of possibilities, and a death ordained by nature? The death of God is no trivial matter. Nietzsche announces it vehemently. When I hear Nietzsche being labeled as a nihilist, I wonder, do those who say this actually read his books? He's not a nihilist. He heralds nihilism as a consequence of the death of God. The world crumbles, that world. The individual who emerges from Platonism is one who has transcended the dichotomy of good and evil, convinced of the demise of God and the futility of the quest for meaning. It's not about truth, but rather about the arrival of a new kind of person, an overman, who diverges from the Platonic archetype. Nietzsche depicts this figure as a camel bearing the burden of morality, Then, in Thus Spoke Zarathustra, evolving into a lion to confront the truth, and ultimately a child when the world reveals itself beyond reason, exposing all things as illusions. We must learn to live knowing they are illusions. Only the overman can achieve this.